I've played a lot of 2D Metroidvanias. They're possibly my favorite genre, as they have the freedom to combine many aspects of game design into tightly focused packages for players to sink into. Tales of Kenzera Zao is a good example of this. It boasts slick-feeling platforming with double jumps, air dashes, and grappling hooks with weighty combat that sees you switching between two styles for close-range and long-range encounters. It pours a ton of heart and soul into its musical score and voice work, eliciting dramatic shifts in mood and tone as the narrative demands. Its characters and story, inspired by Bantu mysticism and Afrofuturism, bring a woefully underrepresented setting to life with fascinating world building and beautifully realized art design. But while the setting is a breath of fresh air, I dig deeper on that aspect in my previous video on the game, it's actually the story's focus on grief that truly moved me in ways I hadn't anticipated. Some of the best games I've ever played have tied their narratives to death. The Outer Wilds has you desperately trying to prevent the sun from exploding, while Genesis Noir makes you evaluate the worth of all human history against the life of your beloved. But where these games seek to ease apprehension about the end, I was surprised to find that Tales of Kenzera Zao was far more concerned with those left behind. The game's creator and founder of Surge Studios, Abubakar Salim, crafted this experience as a means of dealing with the death of his father. In the opening moments, you take control of Zuberi, a young man who's recently lost his father to illness. Zuberi finds a book written by his father that tells the story of Zao, the warrior shaman and protagonist of the game. Zao seeks out the god of death Kalunga to barter for the return of his own recently deceased father's soul. The theming is clearly not subtle, but this daisy chain of grievers was the first of many interactions that slowly helped me understand that this wasn't so much a story about death as it was a story about grief. Your main objective as Zao is to find and subdue three great spirits that have eluded the god of death. In doing so, Kalunga has agreed to return your father's soul, but the task isn't as simple as it seems. Zao meets other inhabitants of the land of Kenzera, who have ties or unfinished business with these spirits, and each encounter, on top of being a harrowing boss battle, was a surprising twist or heartfelt lesson on grief. There are different kinds of grief. Death in the physical sense is the most obvious one, but there are deaths in the spiritual or emotional sense, like the end of a romance, or even the end of your childhood. In both direct and indirect ways, Zao is challenged to help others deal with these various kinds of grief, while in turn evaluating his own. These main quest storylines are greatly aided by smaller codex entries you can discover while exploring, that tell incredibly poetic stories about the mythos of the world.
To heal is not an action, but the persistence of the soul. Perpetual is the responsibility. Eternal is the battle of betterment.
Each of the ability upgrades you find are named after notable shamans of the past, and impart deep and meaningful lessons on responsibility, regret, and sacrifice. I was moved constantly by the game's writing. In my preview video mentioned earlier, I covered a lot of the ways I felt similar to Abubakar, both of us being second-gen kids of African parents in a foreign land. But there are some big differences. I've rarely been told folklore of this nature in my own home. Despite growing up with both parents and a large extended family of Nigerian immigrant aunts and uncles, I'm a dangerously Americanized inheritor of that lineage. But primarily, I've never experienced the death of a close relative of any kind. I have never had to deal with grief. And the more time that passes in my life where that remains true, I fear what the sudden deaths of many of my older relatives or my parents might do to someone like me who has no exposure to it. Despite this fact, I finished Tales of Kenzera Zao as a sobbing mess. I've not experienced this kind of grief myself, but I feel much closer to understanding it thanks to how the game uses its multiple layers of characters dealing with the same trauma, almost like barriers to soften the acceptance of that grief for the one before them, ultimately leading back to you, the player, in accepting whatever grief may have befallen you in your life. Tales of Kenzera Zao is a great Metroidvania experience. It blends challenging action and platforming with a deeply personal and emotional narrative that should resonate with anyone who's ever had to deal with grief, and possibly many who haven't. But more than addressing grief related to the death of a loved one, it dissects its impact and expounds on the different ways it can manifest. I personally felt that it managed to make me think about relationships I've grieved with people who are still living, as well as grief over the loss of personal self-identities, like the independence you lose after becoming a parent. For me, who's not yet had to deal with the pain of losing someone so close, it was both a terrifying and comforting experience that I'll never forget.